are so excited for our next episode of Inside Hollywood. Let me hand it over to Freda, and I'll see you guys in a little bit. Oh, Freda, you're muted. You gotta open up your microphone.
There we go.
That's the kind of good director I am.
You are excellent. Not to mention your ace producing skills, which we'll see at the telethon. More about that later. Hawk, thank you. In this season of Thanksgiving, you've done 38 remarkable shows. You are extraordinary. Your breadth and knowledge of TV and film, the people you know, the fact that you have a lifetime of extraordinary experience in the industry lends itself so perfectly to this show. I can't imagine anybody else doing it. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for doing all the research you do, for talking your friends into joining you. It's really fantastic. So thank you again. And I know that today is going to be a fantastic show. We're really looking forward to it.
Well, thanks, Freda. And hi to everybody out there, all the residents and the Facebook, MPTF Facebook. I'm really excited today because I get to speak with a real legend, not a hype, but really a legend. 11 Emmys, more than 50 pilots, over 1,000 TV episodes, and been the director of the biggest hits in TV sitcom for over 50 years. If I name them all, we wouldn't have time to talk. So I'll just say quickly, Taxi, Cheers, Frasier, and Will and Grace are just the tip of the iceberg. Recently, he directed the Norman Lear Live in Front of a Studio Audience series with All in the Family, Jefferson, Good Times, Facts of Life, Different Strokes. And his new book, directed by James Burrows, is a must-read. It's hilarious, and it's also educational. You want to know anything about TV sitcoms and how they work, boy, you got to read this. I'm honored to be speaking today with Jim Burrows. Come on in, Jim. Welcome.
Happy to be here. I can't wait to meet Jim Burrows.
And I have to start out again by thanking you, A, for being here, but B, for being such a big supporter of the MPTF. As I'm sure you know, we need it now more than ever, and you've been fantastic. So really.
I appreciate that. It's a wonderful cause, and I'm grateful to have the ability to be able to help you guys.
Great. So let's start with tell us about where you grew up and what it was like being the son of a Broadway legend, your father, Abe Burrows.
I grew up in, believe it or not, I was actually born in Los Angeles. I was born at the old Cedars of Lebanon, which is now Scientology heaven. You too?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was where the people schlepped further east than they ever have before to birth kids. And but when we were 5, my mom and dad had divorced, and I moved to New York and grew up in New York City, as you can tell from my accent. And, growing up in the city it's a wonderful experience. Jackie Gleason once said, when you leave New York, you're camping out. And
it's that great New Yorker cartoon, right? It's New York,
yes, Saul Steinberg, right. So I grew up there, and I was the son of a legend. My father, Abe Burrows, wrote Guys and Dolls, wrote and directed How to Succeed in Business, Can, Cactus Flower, 40 Carats, a number of plays on Broadway. So I was Abe's kid in New York City. And it was great being Abe's kid. I got to be trundled off to rehearsals for shows, and I would sit there in the back of the theater and didn't pay any attention to what was going on, but I was learning while my father was teaching me while I didn't know I was learning, and so that kind of stuff just settled in me. I never wanted to be in show business, because Abe was such a legend. So
did your father want you to emulate him, or did he want you to have your own path?
He never pushed me. He never he never said, no, you have to follow in my footsteps. I went to Oberlin College where I was a government major, and I graduated in 62, so that'll tell you how old I am. I wish I was 62, but I'm not. The Vietnam War was happening, and I didn't want to do that, so I got into the Yale School of Drama. So it was the first time that I was exposed to what theater was all about, and so then I kind of found my way in there. I was in there as a writer. I'm not a very good writer, but I kind of like directing. And then once I got out, my dad got me a job as my first job literally was I was a dialogue coach on a series he did called OK Crackerby, which starred Burl Ives. So I was Burl Ives' dialogue coach.
So you ran lines with him, and
I said it's Jimmy Crackcorn, not Jimmy. He was a wonderful man. There was not much difference between him in real life and him on the screen. That was, and so that failed, and then I got a job in summer stock, and then I got a job as an assistant stage manager on Broadway. And doing Breakfast at Tiffany's, where I met Mary Tyler Moore, and my career was starting.
what was it like when you went and did all these things backstage, and everybody knew you were a Burrows kid? How did you? I'm asking this question because I obviously, as a lot of people here know, I'm the son of Howard W. Koch, and I had a lot of the same kind of issues. So I wondered how you felt, and did he kind of put his arm around you and make you feel like, it's there, or was he just sit here and watch and listen? How was that relationship while you were working for him?
Well, when I was working for him, on the first show, it was Breakfast at Tiffany's, a musical. My dad adapted the Truman Capote novella into a musical, and I was the assistant to the assistant stage manager. So I was literally in charge of Mary Tyler Moore and Richard Chamberlain, which were the two stars of the show, two Hollywood people doing their first Broadway show. So I would guide them and everything like that. So I was, it was pretty easy for me, that job. My dad was occupied with making the show better, and it was not as great a show. And that people knew I was Abe's kid. I never said, come with me, I'm Abe's kid. I was just, I was Abe's kid, and the show became a disaster.
Incidentally, just as an aside, Freda Johnson, who you just met, is the, I guess, related to Nunnally Johnson, who evidently also wrote on that Breakfast at that Hollywood.
Yes. Yeah. So we went out of town with the show. It was a huge hit out of town because of Mary Tyler Moore, Richard Chamberlain, Laura Petrie, and Dr. Kildare. And so David Merrick, who was then the guru producer on Broadway, didn't like the shape of the show. I don't blame him. It was not a great show. So he replaced my father with a man who won many awards for musical comedy, Edward Albee. And he also replaced my dad as the director. And I went to my father and I said, can I stay on the Titanic? And he said, yes, please do. So I stayed on the show, and Edward rewrote, and we previewed in New York because we didn't want to go back out of town. And the previews were horrible. They were horrible. Mary would come off after every scene and collapse into my arms weeping because the audience talked back. And so that's how I became close with Mary Tyler Moore, which 7, 8 years later would really help me out. But when I worked for my father, I never was, I'm Jim Burrows and Abe is my dad. I never did that. People knew it. And to tell you the truth, it didn't help me with girls. So I kind of abandoned that. And then, so
I had a harder time because I was Howard Koch Jr., so there no way I could get away from it.
Well, you change it to Hawk. I mean, you can get away with that.
Yeah, I did, but it took me till I was 50 and got bar mitzvah, so that's another story.
Oh my God, I was 47 when I was bar mitzvah. In the book, I talk. When I was bar mitzvah to 47, my two partners, the Charles brothers on Cheers, they said that I was the only man who they knew was bar mitzvah at 47 and lost his hair at 13.
Nothing but fun. I think that I always talk about the most important bone in your body is the funny bone, and you've got it a million times. And without humor, I don't know where we'd be in this world. I loved how you met Mary Tyler Moore, and can you talk about this decision you made to write a letter to them, to Mary and Grant?
Yeah. So after the Breakfast at Tiffany's, I stage managed on Broadway a little more. I did 40 Carats with Julie Harris, and then I went out and did a lot of straw hat theater and resident theater and dinner theater, because I did a lot of 40 Carats because I was a stage manager, knew the staging and knew where the funny was. And then I was literally in Wallingford, Connecticut, directing 40 Carats with Joan Fontaine. And Saturday after rehearsal, I went home and I turned on the TV, and there was the Mary Tyler Moore Show. And I had never seen it before. And I noticed that was a 25-minute show filmed in front of a live audience. And I had been doing 2-hour plays in stock in a week, and they were doing 25 minutes in a week. And I said, maybe I can do that. So I wrote this letter to Mary, which is in the book, and I got a call from Grant Tinker about a month after the letter saying, we're at MTM. We have the MTM show. We have the Newhart show. We have the Paul Sand show, and we have the Bob Crane show. So they had 4 live sitcoms, and they said, we know that theatrical directors are good for this type of show. So we'd like to bring you out to do one show. So that was in 1974.
Wow. And that took a lot of courage to write that letter. A lot of people don't ever do that. And good for Grant that he actually knew about this and brought you out. So
it helped that he knew me. Yeah.
Yeah. And did Mary remember you from?
Oh yeah. Because I would occasionally, when I ran a theater in San Diego for a couple of years in the early 70s, and when I would come up, I would sometimes run into her, and we would reacquaint about the time on the Titanic. And of course, she was flying high because she was, the Mary Tyler Moore Show was taking off then.
Right. So was the first show you directed of sitcoms, was it the Mary Tyler Moore Show?
It was. And I came out in May of 74, and I knew how to talk to actors and I knew what was funny, but if you're doing a multi-camera sitcom, you have to learn the cameras, the technical aspects. So I spent, 2-3 months looking at cameras, watching people. I watched Alan Rafkin and I watched Peter Bonners, and then I went over to the Mary Tyler Moore Show and I watched Jay Sandridge, who became my mentor.
Yeah, I read that in the book. I remember Jay.
Yeah, so he was a wonderful man. Unfortunately, he passed away.
Yeah,
just about a year ago. He was my mentor, and that's such a sweetheart.
And he really let you. He kind of embraced you and really helped you learn before you actually had to go and be the man.
Right, but I met him the day I met him. When I went over to watch the Mary Tyler Moore Show, and he shook my hand. He had a wedding ring. The next day when I went to lunch with him, he didn't. So I became his first friend after his divorce. So it was not only on a professional level, it was on a very dear personal level. In fact, he married my first wife's best friend. So we have multiple connections. And so, yeah. So I watched for a while. Jay helped me for a while. I became Paul Sand's dialogue coach. And then eventually in, I think, October or November of 74, I got my first show, a Mary Tyler Moore Show.
And was it scary? Were you scared? Were you confident? What were you doing that week?
Needless to tell you, the first day of rehearsal, I brought a change of underwear. Okay? That'll tell you. I mean, I'm going in to direct. I don't know if they were the number 1 or the number 3 or number 5 show on the air with that wonderful cast who had been together for 3-4 years and were, it was scary for me. I met them, I said hello, we read the script around the table and I said to Grant Tinker, it wasn't a very good reading. I said, in a sea of Danish, I get a bagel. And and then I went down on stage and I started rehearsing stuff I knew would change. And I did everything. I tried a couple of jokes. I had a couple of comic moments. I invoked Shakespeare. I invoked Chekhov. And we rehearsed. It was not a great show, but just before we shot it, I was walking to the stage for that moment to begin filming. And Mary came out of her trailer and she said, "We feel our investment in you has worked out."
Oh.
And I was through the roof. I couldn't believe it.
Fantastic.
The show was not a great show, but I guess they liked what I did and how I contributed. And
well, you learned. I mean,
yeah, and
everybody's got to start somewhere.
I know, and I got instant. I got work on the Newhart show and Paul Sand and the Bob Crane show, and then next year I became the resident director on Phyllis, and my career was on the way.
Wow. Now, I, like you, as I read in the book, I was a huge Bob Newhart fan. I knew every word of all of his albums.
Oh, yeah.
And he was so dry and so, I loved, Eisenhower Waiting for Khrushchev, if you remember that one, at the plane on the album, and to the Abner Doubleday going to the patent office.
Right.
They were fantastic. But I never expected him to have a sitcom. Tell me about working with Newhart.
Bob was the greatest. He was, Bob had Bob's style. You wrote to Bob's style. That's why they made him a psychologist, because the crazy person sat opposite him. And he could do those dry takes and those wonderful lines. And, he was amazing. There's a great, he had that wonderful stammer, and which, if you listen to the albums, you hear it. But that was part of the act. And there's an apocryphal story about, and I think it's been confirmed, that on the pilot, one of the producers said to him, when Newhart was making a phone call on the pilot, producer said to him, "Can you, maybe do less of the stammer?"
Oh.
And Newhart said to him, "That stammer built me a house in Beverly Hills."
Great. Now, I happen to know Suzanne Plachette earlier before this and then that, and fun and funny, but also the dirtiest mouth I think I've ever heard on anybody. How did you, it just comes out of her. How did you keep that together with Bob Newhart and actually shoot with what did you have to do with Suzanne?
Well, Suzanne was just, bawdy. She was just downright. See, I knew her before you knew her. She replaced an actress in a show my dad did on Broadway. I can't remember the name of it. it starred Tom Poston and her, and she came in as the replacement. So I knew her from back then, but she liked me. I played to her bawdiness, and Newhart liked her.
Oh.
And on that show, that was the most important thing.
Yeah.
You know, they got on great. Bob never worked blue. You know, his act was never that way.
Right.
But Suzanne certainly worked blue, and
Yeah.
you know, unfortunately, she's gone, and
Oh, she was the greatest.
oh my God, you know, she.
So now moving on, because I've only got a short amount of time. For all of you who don't know, Jim actually only did 75 episodes of Taxi. And I happen to know Danny. We tried to make a movie together that fell apart, but that's another story. But you describe in the book talk about Danny's audition. I just think it's, anybody who's seen Danny, it's perfect.
Yeah, Danny came in to read for the part of Louis De Palma, and he walked in and to the audition room, threw the script on the table, and said, "Who wrote this shit?" And we had our Louis De Palma. He was wonderful. He was incredibly funny, and his stature also helped with you know, in the pilot he doesn't come out until the end of Taxi, and you know, he and some of the scenes between he and Judd are just magnificent.
Phenomenal sitcom. Tell me about, there's also something in your book that I loved, which was Andy Kaufman, I think, is was beyond. But evidently his alter ego, Latka's alter ego, had a few problems on the show.
Yeah.
And I guess you had to, how did you end up firing him?
Well, the boys, the show was created by Jim Brooks, Ed Weinberger, Stan Daniels, and Dave Davis. And they always wanted Andy Kaufman to be the monitor, to be the monitor, why did I say that? To be the mechanic.
Right.
And so they went to him.
It was a Civil War thing, I think, monitor and the Merrimack guy.
Yeah. So they went to him and they said, "We want to use your character, Foreign Man. We would like you to do that in Cheers, in Taxi." So he said, through George Shapiro, his wonderful manager, he said, "I will do it if Tony Clifton can be in one episode." And Tony Clifton was Andy's alter ego. He was a guy, it was Andy. Andy would dress up with padding, with prosthetics on his face, with a big belly, in a brocade tuxedo with a ruffled shirt and a black tie. And he would show up at some of Andy's live shows and he would open for Andy. He was he would be a Las Vegas lounge singer, and he would do terrible songs. And the audience would scream, "Get Andy Kaufman, get Andy Kaufman." And so Andy would go backstage, take off all the stuff, and come back as Andy, or come back as Foreign Man, his character. So Andy, you know, the only way to do it would, if he was going to do the show, was to give Tony Clifton a shot. So the 7th episode of the first year, we hired Tony Clifton. And he was to play, the part was to be Louis De Palma's brother. It was an episode with Louis De Palma's brother. So Andy, this was the day that Bucky Dent hit the home run that the Yankees got them into the playoffs for the
Boston.
78, maybe. Yeah, 1978. And Andy had day night reversals, so Andy showed up for her rehearsals normally and after lunch. At 9 a.m. that day, when Tony Clifton was hired, Andy walks in, 9 a.m., smoking a cigarette. Andy never smoked. And he's playing Tony Clifton. "Let's get to work. Let's go out there. Let's do this." You know, so, oh my God, Tony and I are trying to watch the game. We go out, we rehearse, and I can tell you right away it's not going to work because you have Andy Kaufman playing Tony Clifton playing Louis De Palma's brother. So I call Ed Weinberger and I say to Ed, it's not going to work. And Ed comes down and watches and he agrees. So he calls George Shapiro and says, we're going to have to fire Tony. And George says, Andy's not going to be happy. And so the next day is a Tuesday. And we come down and we're going to fire him. But one of the contingencies is he has to be fired in front of the whole cast with a prostitute on each knee.
Oh.
So we acquiesce. Ed comes down and says, you're fired. And Tony says, I'm not leaving. You're fired. I'm not leaving. You're fired. I'm not leaving. So I'm in front of the stands watching this with Tony Danza, Jeff Conaway, and Judd Hirsch. And Conaway is about to explode, and he wants to run out there and strangle strangle Andy. And Tony and I both take Jeff, take him behind the stage and say, you're not going to ruin this for us. You're not going to ruin this. This is great ghetto theater. You got to let this happen. So we calmed him down. We went back out, and he still says, I'm not leaving. So Judd says, okay, I'll play. He goes, he picks up Tony, drags him off the soundstage onto the studio lot. He's screaming out there. The security guards take him off. We hire another actor. He comes in on Wednesday. The show's fine. The following week, Andy comes back as Latka as if nothing happened.
Wow.
And it was, some people think he took advantage of us. Some people said you indulged him, but you're not going to miss that moment.
No.
There's no way. The show didn't suffer at all. Andy got what he wanted, and we got a good show. So,
Wow.
And it was
What a
worth it because Andy was wonderful as Latka.
What a story. Have you got a favorite episode out of those 75 that you go, oh, man?
Yeah, it's called Reverend Jim at Space Odyssey, which is Chris Lloyd, who played Ignatowski, Reverend Jim, was hired the first year as a weekly hire to be the minister that marries Latka and a hooker to keep Latka in the country. So we were so impressed with Chris that we had him back the next year as a regular, and we did an episode where he becomes a cabbie. And I think that episode contains a scene which maybe has the biggest laugh in the history of my sitcom career, which is when the drivers take him for the driver's test, and he has to take the written exam, and he's over with a group of people taking the written exam while our cast members are at a table, waiting for him to finish. And he goes, psst, Reverend goes, psst, what does a yellow light mean? And Jeff Conaway says, slow down. And Reverend Jim goes, what does a yellow light mean? And Conaway goes, slow down. And he goes, what? Duh. And the laugh went on for 45 seconds. And I had to cut it. And Jim Brooks is still furious with me for cutting it after 45 seconds.
I've seen it, and I still laugh just hearing about it.
If you look at it, watch not only Chris Lloyd, but the four of them who really want to crack up because the audience is going crazy. They all maintain the attitudes of the character, and Chris Lloyd finds a way to do what does yellow light mean different every time. So it's an amazing moment.
Is there an embarrassing moment that you had on Taxi that you can remember that you might, because everything's great, but sometimes things go awry?
I don't remember. I mean, there were a few moments when the writers and I didn't get on. But, at that point, I had to suck it up because I didn't have my cojones yet.
Right. Well, moving to, you co-created and directed only 237 episodes of Cheers. I mean, that's unbelievable. What's the guy's name? Malcolm Gladwell, 10,000 hours. You were way beyond 10,000 hours. And I understand when it first aired, I can't believe this, that it was like on last place in the Nielsen's. Now, what changed? What did you have to do? And how did the audience, how were you able to find the audience? Or how was the audience able to find Cheers?
We were, Thanksgiving, we had a show Thanksgiving night, a Cheers show. And it was, I like to say it was 72nd out of 69 shows. So that's how bad it was. Well, we were up against Simon & Simon and Magnum PI, and I forget what was on ABC, but it was a world of only 3 networks. So, the ratings were huge for those shows. And people didn't watch us. The press loved us. We got a lot of great press. We got, this wonderful press. And then Grant Tinker at that point had come over to run NBC with Brandon Tartikoff. And they were 2 of our biggest fans because I started at MTM and so did the Charles brothers. And so they said, just keep doing these shows. They're great. People will find you. And then what happened in the summer reruns, they didn't have summer shows then. They would just run the shows that ran during the fall and spring. They'd run them again. So people had seen Simon & Simon and Magnum PI. So they went and looked at other alternatives. And they started to watch Cheers. In fact, one month in the summer, we shot up to 9th, which was crazy for us because we were always in the 50s. And then the second year, some people who had seen us in the summer came to watch us in the fall and the spring. And then in the third year, Cosby came on here at NBC. So you had a lineup of Cosby, Family Ties, Cheers, and I don't remember, a Madman of the People. Night Court was there for a while.
That was
And
Thursday night,
Cosby,
right? Was that Thursday night?
What?
What night?
Thursday night.
Thursday
Must
night,
see TV.
Yeah.
Must see TV.
Right.
And Cosby, went through the roof, and so we became in the top 10 for the rest of our run.
And that was 10 years or something?
11. We ran 11 years.
11 years. Were you there for the casting? I'm assuming you were there for the casting of Cheers. And did you know Ted or did you know
Shelley? I knew Ted. Ted had come in to read for us for a pilot of a show called Best of the West that Ed Weinberger wrote. And he was, he had to be a sheriff. He was not, he was not right, but you could see that he had a funny bone. And so I remembered him, and I remembered him from Body Heat, the movie, where he dances. He has this kind of light touch in the movie. So I told the boys, this guy was really good. And then Shelley, people have been trying to get Shelley because she was in Second City, and she was a big sketch person, and she was pretty and funny, which is hard to find. So we had to convince her to read the script, and Teddy, and then we had an audition of 3 different couples to be Sam and Diane, and the obvious choice were Ted and Shelley.
Wow. Is there a favorite episode from, you can remember 237 of them? My God.
It's hard. I think there are a number of them, but I think my favorite is the 2-parter at the end of the first year, because it's a script Glenn and Les wrote about Sam and Diane eventually kissing at the end of that episode.
Yeah, I remember that. There was
And
a lot of stink about that, wasn't there?
because people said you've ruined the show. There's no more flirtation now once they kiss. And we said, if Sam Malone can't get a woman in bed in a year, what kind of stud is he? But anyway, that show it's really all our characters and Sam's brother, who you never see in a back room in the bar. And it was brilliantly written and acted through the roof. And I think it's my favorite episode.
I'm going to have to watch that one. Did your dad get a chance to know your success before he passed away?
My dad started to have dementia in the late 70s. I don't know whether it was Alzheimer's. We never did an autopsy on him. But he came out to see me do. I think I did a Tony Randall show in the mid 70s that he saw, and he saw the beginning of Cheers, but I don't think he was that with it. He did give me a note that said he wishes the bartender had more dirt under his fingernails, and I thought it was very astute because Teddy was not a sports fan at all. He was not. He was playing an athlete. He wasn't an athlete, and so he was right, and my dad was right. But he never got to see. After that, he died in '85.
It's unbelievable. I mean, I sent you a few things yesterday, but again, my dad, dementia and Alzheimer's. We have so much in common, Jim.
I know, it's crazy. I said, are we separated at birth?
Possibly,
yeah.
Possibly. Now, let's talk about Frasier for a minute, just quickly. Kelsey obviously was in Cheers for years, and now he has his own show. How different was it, and what did you have to do to change or approach him as, Frasier as opposed to one of the guys on Cheers?
Well, I didn't have to do too much. The show was created by David Angel, Peter Casey, and David Lee. Angel, Casey, and Lee, who were producers of Cheers, like in the 5th through the 7th year, and then went on to do Wings, and then they created Frasier, and they wanted to spin off Kelsey. So Glenn and I had nothing to do with that. They were the ones who saw the fact that Frasier, the buffoon on Cheers, could become Sam Malone on Frasier. He could become the center of the show. That's why. That's how good an actor Kelsey was. So they put Kels at the center of that show, and they hired David Hyde Pierce to play Frasier. In essence, Niles became Frasier, and they did it brilliantly. And the working relationship was the same. Kels knew my drill, and I knew his drill, and everybody else. The 4 people who had never been on, although Perry was on a Cheers episode and John Mahoney was on a Cheers episode, the others just fell right into the routine that I carried over from Cheers, and worked great on Cheers, and why wouldn't it work great on Frasier?
Yeah, I got to work with Mahoney on a movie called Primal Fear. What a wonderful man.
A wonderful man.
Recently too.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So now, wait a minute. You do 11 seasons of Will and Grace. The first 8, and then phenomenally, they brought him back for 3 more seasons. Because I like to say you can go homo again. Well, no, but it really was a seminal movie, and it really had cojones, to pull that off and talk about how the audience felt about the premise the first time you showed it, and how open. Because what was it, 98 or something? There was still a lot of lot of people hiding, not speaking about homosexuality.
Right. The boys, the NBC sent me a script, and I said to my agent Broder, he's so powerful he only has one name. I said to Broder, I have to do this show because they execute Max Muchik and David Cohen executed this script with great facility. And, I met with them. I met with the boys. And I said, you've done a great job here because you've written a funny show that just happens to have two gay people in it. It's not an agenda show. It's not proselytizing. It just happens to have two gay people. I like to say it's a fairy tale, literally and figuratively. And we only tried to do funny. I knew 25% of the country would never watch the show. And another 25% would be a little reluctant to tune in. So I said to the guys, let's make it as funny as possible. And let's do a good show, not preaching, just absolutely funny. And eventually, the word of mouth in television takes a lot longer than the movies. In the movies, you got to open the first week. As you know, if you don't open the first week, you're in trouble most of the time. In television, it takes a while. You got to run into people at the supermarket because the advertising blitz isn't as much. And you got to tell people in the supermarket, I saw this show, Will and Grace. I think it's kind of funny. And, you tell your friend that, and your friend forgets about it for a while and then maybe sees, a blurb in the paper and then tunes in. So it takes a while. So it took us a while. I said to NBC, please don't put us in a spot the first year where we have to prove ourselves because, 50% of the country is going to be iffy about the show. So they put us after a show and at 9:30, and eventually people started to watch. And, eventually it, we like to say Ellen opened the door and we knocked it down. It was so funny. You didn't see the strings, right. And you didn't see the fact that there was, in essence, we were trying to say back then it was a lot different than when we came back, when we did the reboot. But back then, we just wanted to say that gay people are fine. They're just like anybody else. And the crowning achievement for me when I figured out that the show had an effect on the population is I would drive carpool on Thursday for my 13-year-old daughter, and I would pick up 3 other kids, and I would be on my way to school, and invariably one of those 13-year-olds would say to me, "What's on Will and Grace tonight?" So I knew if they were learning at 13, that would affect them in their 20s and 30s. And
tell me, sorry to interrupt. Tell me, casting. Was there a discussion of, because today I don't think you could hire a straight person to play Will and Jack. Do you? I mean, I think it's changed.
I don't know. I don't know about that. Eric was the best person that, and we did have Jack. We had Sean was a gay man, so
right.
And the writer was a gay. Well, Max was gay. Is gay, not was. Is gay.
Right.
And so I don't know if you fight hard enough, I think you can. You want the best person for the role.
Right. Moving on for a moment. We spoke earlier, or maybe I did. I don't know if I did or not, but you were on Edward R. Murrow, Person to Person. Your dad was being interviewed, and as a kid, you're there, and they're doing all this wonderful stuff about your dad. And 60 years later, NBC does a tribute to Jim Burrows with all of the casts of some of these great shows. And I wondered if you reflected back on, wow, I was this kid there and now they're doing this for me? And is there a synchronicity to that? And do you think about that at all?
I always, I do. There's a certain unbelievability. Maybe that's not the right word. There's a certain doubt in my mind that I deserve, that I deserve that.
Welcome to the club.
Yeah. I do what I know how to do, and the fact that it brought me all this fame and credibility is wonderful, but there still is a doubt in my mind that I don't know if I deserve that, and I'm grateful for it, and I've lived, I'm living a wonderful life. But there still is, this doubt. I look at myself in that Edward R. Murrow thing where, he comes into the home with all these cameras to interview a famous person, my dad, and my sister and I are in it at the end. And Ed Murrow asked me, have I decided on my career? And I say I haven't made up my mind yet. So believe it or not, the director of that episode of Edward R. Murrow, John Frankenheimer.
Oh, you're kidding.
No, he told me that. I met him. I know. I met him.
I worked with John, and my dad produced The Manchurian Candidate. So
right. I met him about in the early '80s, and he told me that. So,
wow.
But anyway, I look at that, and I'm still a humble guy. I've always been a humble guy. In my book, I talk about kindness, and that's how I that's how I work. I work through kindness. I abhor any kind of tension or any kind of ego on a set. So, I mean, that was my mom and my dad.
Good for you, Jim. And also people speak, I've done some research on you. Your laugh, if you have to laugh, whether it's funnier yet or not, but everybody talks about the Burrows laugh. And if you laugh, it's okay.
I have to, in rehearsal, I'm the only one there. Right. So in rehearsal, I have to laugh when I think the audience is going to laugh, so that the cast is prepared for that and don't get buffaloed by that. I do it, it's not a fake laugh, it's a real laugh.
Is there a character in any of your sitcoms? What character in all your sitcoms comes closest to Jim Burrows?
If you've seen The Comeback, have you seen The Comeback?
No, what's
the Lisa Kudrow series that was on for 2 episodes? There's a character in there. There's a character in there. She plays a sitcom actress. There's a character in there called Jimmy the Director. I play that part.
Really?
I acted in that. I acted about 7 episodes.
Okay, that's you playing it. But is there a character in any of that you're not playing yourself, but that you, I guess, are closest to who you are?
I'll probably say Malone.
Yeah.
Although I'm not, or maybe Alex Rieger, Judd Hirsch.
Right.
I'm a center. Those guys are centers of the show. Those guys are the windows that the audience sees the show through. So,
is there a pilot that you shot, because you did so many of them, that didn't get picked up that you thought the powers that be really missed?
Yeah, I did a pilot of The Goodbye Girl in 1979, written by Alan Katz, who's a dear friend, with Karen Valentine and Michael Lembeck. That was a wonderful pilot, and it got lost in the negotiations between the network and one Mr. David Beagleman.
Mm.
You do remember him, right?
No. I mean, again, in common, I played baseball with Michael Lembeck, and I was on a film that we fired Robert De Niro after 7 days of shooting. Neil Simon went back and rewrote it, and 2 years later, 3 years later, it was The Goodbye Girl, and Dreyfus won the Oscar. And so, I mean, there's so many parallels. It's unbelievable to me.
So that show got lost in negotiations.
Yeah.
It's a shame.
Yeah. What is different about working in television today? What do you like about the changes, and what don't you like about the changes of today?
Well, the quality for me, especially in the sitcom world, is not what it used to be. It's people are doing comedy that doesn't have to have mass appeal anymore, because with streaming you don't need a number like you needed a number if you were on network television, and back in the 70s and 80s. And so you can do a show about, a small bookstore that has, sells only cookbooks, and, you can be really specific. You don't have to be all encompassing, appealing to a mass audience. So, plus, back when I started, there were 3 networks and 30 great comedy writers. Now there are 300 networks and 30 great comedy writers. So, that's the situation.
Do you have a favorite of all your shows?
Yeah, Cheers, since that we birthed that show. The Charles brothers were nice enough to give me a co-created credit on that show, and I'm eternally grateful to them. And that's from my loins, that show.
What's left on your bucket list?
I don't know. I think I've filled my bucket. I'll probably get a bigger bucket and maybe fill it with more of the same. I would enjoy doing, at my age, I would enjoy doing a show, another comedy, a situation comedy, not one camera in front of a live audience, where every Tuesday night it makes me laugh, because that's, the Norman Cousins thing. Laughter adds many years to your life.
Yeah.
And if I could find another show that was a multi-camera show, I would do it, and maybe do a couple of more live in front of a studio audience with Norman. Because
talk about that, because you'd had 4 camera shows for all those others, and then you went live for Norman. How different was that, and how scary?
Oh, it was really scary. On the multi-camera sitcoms, you shoot film or you shoot digital, and then an editor cuts it. When I'm doing it live, I have to cut the show, and I have to cut it in real time because it's going out live. And so that's pretty alien to me, although now I've become a little better adept at it, because having done 3 or 4. So I have a ball in those shows, because you get, I got to work with Jamie Foxx and Will Ferrell and Kerry Washington and Wanda Sykes and Woody. I got to work with Woody again, and Marissa Tomei, and then Jen Aniston and Catherine Hahn and Kevin Hart, and I got to work with Snoop. So it's a thrill. And the great thing is, I work with somebody who's older than me, Mr. Lear. And how often does that opportunity come?
I met Norman because my dad produced Come Blow Your Horn with Norman.
Right.
Directing.
Right.
I've only known Norman since 1962. So unbelievable.
A wonderful human being.
Oh my God. And he's 100, right?
Yeah, he's 100.
Unbelievable. Talk about a little bit about, you mentioned kindness. Are there other tenets that you kind of have on that in order to be the human being you are and how you work? I you talked about communication and kindness. Are there other qualities that you know about now that maybe you didn't know about in 1974?
Well, yeah, I was swimming for air in 1974. I was just, trying to get to the surface so I could really get some air. As I went on, I found things like, what I do is a writers-driven medium. The writers write the script. They do most of the casting. They do most of the editing. They talk to the network. So actors and directors are one step down, and the actors feel that. And so as a director, I felt that. But as I got more successful, I became this conduit between actors and writers, actors and writers, so that I break down the walls so that the actors don't feel like they have to parrot the words all the time. Yes, the writers work hard on the words, but the actors should show them the words as written, but the actors can create stuff. And then after they've shown the writers their words in a run through, they can then show them another way to do it. And so this ability to empower actors and to empower writers to accept actors and actors to accept writers and to all contribute to make the best show possible will get an actor to act better for you, because if they create a piece of business that ends up in the show, they're ecstatic. So I learned that. I learned that. I watched Jay do that a little bit, but once I hit Cheers, that really became full flower.
Well, I would say the thing I know about you and great directors is trust. The writers have to trust you. The actors have to trust you. The studio or the network's got to trust you. And for all these years, they've trusted you. So this has been a unbelievable hour for me. I hope everybody else has enjoyed it as much as I have. And thank you so much. I have to turn it back to Jen Clymer, our director. She always has a question or two that I give it up. But Jim, thank you so much. What a stimulating hour. Thank you.
Thank you, Hawk. I appreciate that.
So I do have a couple of questions that we ask everyone who has joined us here on Creative Chaos. But before that, I will admit that I listened to Smartless. And that was a wonderful podcast with you and Will Arnett and Jason Bateman and, of course, Sean Hayes. And one of the things that I love is you give everybody nicknames. So I'm wondering, what would your nickname for Hawk be?
Oh, God.
Oh, God. Hawkeye.
Hawkeye, I love it.
I'm sure he's heard that before.
Yeah.
All right, that is not the two hard questions that we ask everybody. But the other thing that I want to say that I loved about that podcast was when they explained how you helped to shield the actors when there was a really good joke that wasn't going to land, that you would always say, "Bup, bup, 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 bup," so that the audience wouldn't hear it. There's just this beautiful magic that happens with 3-camera, 4-camera sitcom setup because it's theater. It's the closest thing that television will ever be to live theater.
Yeah, I did. 90% of humor is surprise. So if on the way to the joke, an actor screws up the line, I will say, bup, 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 bup. Or if the setup line is wrong, I'll say, bup, 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 to protect the integrity of the joke so that the audience hears the joke the right way the first time. Because if they hear it the wrong way, and then I do it the right way the second time, they will not laugh as hard because the element of surprise is gone.
Yeah. All right, so here are the surprising 2 questions. Very difficult. What is your favorite movie and what is your favorite television series? And we can make sure that we are excluding the television series that that you hold near and dear to your heart because you're one of the creators of them, like someone else's work?
Godfather 1
Yep.
and Breaking Bad.
Yes.
2 hysterical comedies.
What do you do for laughter? Like, where do you go for your comedy?
I watch a lot of old Newhart routines, Richard Pryor routines. I watch Curb Your Enthusiasm, which really makes me laugh. I watch The Conners, which is an incredible reboot and lost the star of the show. The writing on that show is exquisite. The delivery, it should be a lighthouse to every director to say, this is the way to underplay a joke and make it just as funny. And I watch old Woody Allen movies and stuff like that.
Well, I have my answers. Thank you so much for spending the time with us. Hawk, let me turn it back to you. And
I just want to say happy holidays to everybody. I hope the couple of people in the residence get rid of the flu and everybody's back to enjoying social stuff. And Jim, again, thank you. This is just wonderful, and I know it's been appreciated by everybody at the home and out in our Facebook world. So
Now, I have one question. Is my picture added to that wall behind you after I do the interview?
I will try. I want to go to Bel Air, and I don't play golf anymore, but maybe we can get a picture and put it up there.
Yeah, okay. There's still room.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
All right, buddy.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
bye, guys.
Bye.
Have a great afternoon. We are going to chat with Freda for a moment about the telethon coming up on December 10th. We are very excited for this opportunity on KTLA. And Jim, we're happy to have you stick around and you
Okay,
can
sure.
learn the details if you want. Great.
And we're happy to have you on the telethon.
Yeah, I got that email. I don't know. What do you need? A blurb from me?
Sure. Yeah. The title of the telethon is Lights, Camera, Take Action. And we have a 2-hour time slot from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. hosted by Tom Bergeron and Yvette Nicole Brown to inform people around Southern California what MPTF does and try and raise awareness and funds.
If you can send me, you'll send me some copy or something like that?
Absolutely.
And I'll do a blurb on is an iPhone fine?
iPhone is perfect.
Okay.
You know, landscape.
Okay. And not too long because I tend to, people tend to tune me out after.
Not based on today's interview.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's not true.
Okay. Just send me something and I'll knock it out for you.
Will do. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to meet you virtually.
Thank you guys. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.